This is lesson 9.6 worksheet. Homework looking at the discriminant. So in 9.5 we studied the quadratic formula. And one little piece of the quadratic formula now we know is called the discriminant. It's the part that's underneath the square root. And because it's underneath the square root and it has the plus or minus in front of it, because the square root can give you a positive or a negative answer, we can determine whether there is no solution, two solutions, or one solution just based on that discriminant. So if we get a 0 in there, the square root of 0 is just 0, and if I add 0 or subtract 0, I'm going to get the same answer. So in those cases, there's just one possible answer. And if we get a positive number in there, every square root of a positive number has two answers, the positive and negative version. So those are the types that will get two answers. And if we get a negative number underneath our square root, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. So there's no solution in that case. So we don't get the actual answer to the quadratic formula by just looking at the discriminant, but we can determine how many solutions there are. So we're going to calculate the value of the discriminant and just find out how many solutions there are. So not the actual answer that we would find for A, but just how many answers there are. So before we can do anything, there's a hint here. Make sure the equations are in standard form before you begin. So standard form means you're going to have everything on the same side with a 0 on the opposite side. So because we have a negative 10 over here right now, this is not in standard form. So I do need to add 10 to both sides to create a 0 over here. That will not affect the a squared or the 13a. Negative 4 plus 10 is 6. So now I have it in standard form. So my a is 6, my b is 13, and my c is 6. Now, if I was going to solve for a here and use the quadratic formula, I would need all of that. But for just finding the discriminant, the part that's underneath the square root, I'm just looking at b squared minus 4ac. And the whole quadratic formula, again, that's the part that's underneath the square root. But we're just looking at the discriminant here. So we're plugging in for b, for a, and for c, but we're not going to solve the entire thing out. So when I plug in for b, it's going to be 13 squared minus 4 times 6 times 6. So 13 squared is 169, and 4 times 6 times 6 is 144. If I go ahead and subtract those, I'm going to get 25. Now, again, we have to be careful. 25 is not the answer. If I plug in 25 to this equation, it is not going to work. This is just the value of the discriminant. So because it is a positive answer, I know that there are two solutions. So if I went ahead and ran the entire quadratic formula, I would get two answers, neither of which are 25. Okay, I want to keep emphasizing that. The answer to this question is not 25. The discriminant is a positive number, which means there will be two possible answers. Okay, number 2, not in standard form yet. So let's go ahead and add the 9 to get 0. Nothing changes with k squared. Nothing changes with k. Negative 12 plus 9, still a negative 3. So a is 8, b is 8, and c is negative 3. So I'm plugging into the b squared minus 4ac. That's the discriminant. So it's 8 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 3. All right, so we have 64. And we got to be careful here. You can treat this minus 4 as a negative 4 times a positive 8 times a negative 3. So since you have two negatives, this would become a positive. So this is going to end up being a plus. If you like bringing it down as a minus and multiplying positive 4, positive 8, negative 3, that's fine. It's going to say negative, and then when you multiply all of this together, you're going to get a negative. So it'll say minus a negative, which will go plus plus. All right, so when I just look at these, I like to look at it and just count how many negatives I have, including this one. So I have two negatives, And so I know that this is going to be a plus or a positive. And then all I got to do is 4 times 8 times 3, and it's 96. So again, you could have written the minus and done 4 times 8 times negative 3. Okay, and then you're going to get negative 96, so it'll say minus negative 96, which in the end goes plus plus and ends up the same as this. So whichever way makes more sense for you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put these together. This comes out to 160. And since it's a positive number, I know I have two solutions. Number 3, let's go ahead and move this negative 11, create a 0 over here, not affecting the terms with a variable. Negative 9 plus 11 would be negative 8. So A is negative 2, B is positive 8, C is negative 8 because of the minus. It's very important to be careful with those negatives. You lose a negative, it could mess the whole thing up. So we're plugging into b squared minus 4ac, so b squared, 8 squared, minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 8. So when I look at this, I see a negative, a negative, a negative. 3 negatives create a negative. 2 negatives cancel each other out and make a positive, but then I still have this negative, so this will be a minus. Then I can just worry about the numbers. So 8 squared is 64. 4 times 2 times 8 is 64. Gets me 0. And so the value of my discriminant is 0, which means I have one possible solution. So if I ran the quadratic formula all the way through, not this, the entire quadratic formula, I would only get one possible answer. The answer would not be 0. I would get one possible answer, though, because the discriminant becomes 0, and when I do the plus minus with 0, it's not going to change anything, so there's only going to be one answer. Number 4, minus 9. So we get 0. And that's going to make a positive 3 here. So A is 7, B is negative 6, C is positive 3. So plugging into b squared minus 4ac, it's negative 6 squared. If you're going to go ahead and throw that in your calculator, you got to put the parentheses around it, or it's going to give you a negative answer, which is not correct. Negative 6 times negative 6 is going to be positive 36. Okay, you can think about that in your head. Don't just trust the calculator. And minus 4 times 7 times 3. So all positives except if you want to count this as a negative 4. So this is going to be a minus. And we've got 4 times 7 times 3, which is 84. And so I can see that's going to be a negative number. 36 minus 84 is negative 48. And so there is going to be no solution for this. So if I ran the quadratic formula, I'd end up with a negative 48 underneath the square root. And if you go ahead and you try and take the square root of a negative number, your calculator will tell you something's wrong. Can't do it. No answers. So that is why there's no solution. All right. Speed things up now. Here we go. So let's minus 13. Get this in standard form. So that's going to create a negative 12. A is 8. Coefficient of P is 1, so B is 1. And C is negative 12. So plugging into b squared minus 4ac, 1 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 12. So 1 squared is going to be 1, and you might say, well, I'm going to minus this, is going to become a negative. But if you count out of these 3, how many negatives you have, I've got a negative 4 and negative 12, positive 8. So 2 negatives will make a positive. This will end up plus. So 4 times 8 times 12 is 384. When I add those together, obviously that's 385. That's a positive discriminant, which means there will be 2 solutions. Standard form, I got a minus 4 here. So it's 12. So I get 13 for A, 9 for B, 12 for C. So 9 squared minus 4 times 13 times 12. So I'm going to get 81. When I look here, I only have one negative, the 4. So I'm going to end up with a minus here, a negative. And just looking at this, I can see that's going to be a really big number, bigger than 81. So this is going to be a no solution. 4 times 13 times 12, 624. So 81 minus 624 is negative 543. So there is no solution when you get a negative discriminant. Minus 3. So we get a plus 9. A is 4, B is negative 12, C is positive 9. So we have negative 12 squared, which will become a positive number when you square it, minus 4 times 9. This is going to be positive 144. Only negative here is with the 4, so this will be a minus. So we're doing 4 times 9, and that is 144. So I get 0, which means 1 solution. Okay, number 8, get this in standard form. So this is plus 7. So A is 4, B is negative 11, and C is positive 7. So negative 11 squared becomes a positive number, that's 121, minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is 7. So out of these three numbers, I have one negative, which means I'm going to end up with a negative, a minus. 4 times 7 is 112. So 121 minus 112 gives me a positive answer of 9. So that means there are 2 solutions. Okay, number 9, get to standard form. So negative 11x squared plus x, this gives me a negative 6. So I have a negative 11a, coefficient of x is 1, and my c is negative. So it's 1 squared minus 4 times 11 times negative 6. Oh, I caught my mistake here. A, when I was writing this down, I forgot the negative. A is negative 11. So this is negative. Okay, so when I multiply these out, I have 3 negatives. 3 negatives will make a negative, so this will be a minus. 1 squared is 1. And if you want, if it makes more sense to you, plug it all in. It's negative 4 times negative 11 times negative 6. So that gets me negative 264. So I write minus 264. So I get a negative 263. Negative answer means no solution. All right, number 10, we're going to minus 9. So I get a negative 8. So I have 3, 4, negative 8. So 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8. 4 squared is 16. Negative, positive, negative. 2 negatives make a plus. 4 times 3 times 8 is 96. Put those together, that's 112. We get a positive discriminant, which means we have 2 solutions. All right, going to the back, the second page. We're going to go ahead and run the full quadratic formula now and get the answer, and we'll talk about looking at the discriminant as we go. All right, so first of all, they need to be in standard form. As I take a quick glance, first two are in standard form, next two are not, and then at the bottom we'll deal with those when we get there. So number 11 is in standard form, which means I can declare an A, a B, and a C. So A equals 4, B equals 11, and C is negative 69. So my full quadratic formula, and I want you to write it out every single time, is negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac. There's our discriminant over 2a. So plugging in, negative b is negative 11 plus or minus square root b squared is 11 squared minus 4 times 4 times c negative 69 over 2 times a, so over 2 times 4. All right, I'm going to move sideways here. So negative 11 plus or minus. Let's solve for the discriminant now. So I'm going to have 121 is 11 squared. As I look, I have a negative, positive, negative. This is going to become a plus. So 4 times 69, 1104 over 2 times 4 is 8. So to finish the discriminant, 121 plus 1104, I'm going to get, bring it over here, negative 11 plus or minus square root of, putting those together, I get 1225 over 8. So I'm going to take the square root of 1225. Oops. And it's a nice even 35. So this becomes 35. So it's negative 11 plus or minus 35 over 8. So I got to solve this two different ways, once with the plus and once with the minus. So negative 11 plus 35 divided by 8 and negative 11 minus 35 over 8. That's going to give me my two answers. Now notice I had a positive discriminant, which means I will get two answers, and they come from here. So negative 11 plus 35 divided by 8 gets me 3. And negative 11 minus 35 divided by 8 gets me negative 5.75. So there's my two answers. Okay. Number 12, already in standard form. So I can declare an A, B, and a C. If it wasn't in standard form, I cannot do that yet. So coefficient to n squared is 1. So A is 1, B is 3, C is negative 130. Quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Again, I want you to keep writing that so you can somewhat memorize it. All right, negative b would be negative 3 plus or minus square root of your discriminant. 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 130. All of that over 2 times 1. All right, so it's negative 3 plus or minus. 3 squared is 9. I'm going to have two negatives here, negative 4 and negative 130, so that's going to become a plus. All of this is going to be over just 2 times 1. So 4 times 1 is 4, so 4 times 130 is 520. So obviously that's 529. So negative 3 plus or minus square root of 529 divided by 2. So what is the square root of 529? 23. So we can rewrite this now. Negative 3 plus or minus 23 over 2. Discriminant was positive, which means we're going to have two answers because we have to do a plus and a minus here. And so separately, I'm going to do negative 3 plus 23 divided by 2. And negative 3 minus 23 divided by 2. And those will give me my two answers. So negative 3 plus 23, well, that's 20. Divided by 2 is 10. Negative 3 minus 23 divided by 2 is negative 13. Okay, as I move to 13, I find one that's not in standard form, so I cannot declare my A, my B, and my C until I get it there. So I need to minus 10 from both sides here. So I get x squared plus 4x minus, or plus 4, I should say. Positive 14 minus 10 is positive 4. Now I can look at my A, B, and C. Coefficient to x squared is 1. B is 4. C is also 4. Quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 4. All of that. Oh, what am I doing? This, I'm just writing it out. Okay, so now plugging in. So negative b is negative 4 plus or minus square root b squared, 4 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 4 over 2 times a, which is 1. All right, let's figure this out in here. 4 squared is going to be 16. I see a minus, and that's it. It's the only one. So it's going to remain a minus. 4 times 1 is 4, times 4 is 16. So this is going to end up becoming 0. The bottom is 2. So it's negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. So because my discriminant is 0, that means I'm only going to have one solution, not two. Like up here I had 2. I'm going to have one solution. And because the reason that is because the square root of 0 is 0. What times itself gives you 0? It's 0. So I can do negative 4 plus 0 divided by 2. And if I really wanted to, I could do negative 4 minus 0 divided by 2. But what's going to be the difference here? There isn't going to be a difference, because whether I add 0 or minus 0, I still get negative 4 on top, and negative 4 divided by 2 gets me the answer of negative 2. So you'd get it twice if you ran it twice, but it's the same answer. So there's just one solution of negative 2. Okay, 14. Not in standard form, so add 4. So 7 plus 4 is 11. These cancel, giving me 0. Now I'm in standard form, so A is 5. B is negative 12. C is 11. Quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So let's plug in. Now, it's negative b, so that would be negative 12. So really that becomes positive. If you just want to go straight to positive 12 there, that's fine. These are going to go plus plus. So it's positive 12 plus or minus square root of, it's going to be negative 12 squared. If you're going to plug that into your calculator, make sure you put it in parentheses. Or just do 12 squared and understand it well enough to know a negative times a negative is a positive. So it's going to be the same. 12 squared and negative 12 squared, same answer, positive 144. Minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. All right, so we got a lot to clean up here. So this becomes a positive 12 plus or minus square root of, I'm going to have 10 on the bottom. Negative 12 squared, that's 144, positive 144. When I look at these right here, I only see one negative, so this is going to become a minus. And 4 times 5 times 11 is 220. And I can stop right here because I can see that I'm going to get a negative answer here for the discriminant. And when I try and take the square root of a negative number, I can't. It's not possible. And so right at this point, because my discriminant is going to create a negative, I know that there is no solution. There is no number that I can come up with that when I plug it in makes this equation true. The discriminant tells me that. Okay, 15, got to get this in standard form. Looks a little bit different than some of the ones that we've been looking at because this over here has the m, but it's the same process. We need it all on the same side. So I'm going to minus 4m from both sides of my equal sign, giving me 0 over here. Now on this side, there is no term with just an m, so I can't combine it with anything. So it's just going to come over here and sit next to the other terms. So it's 2m squared minus 4m minus 48. That's it. So my a is 2, my b is negative 4, and my c is negative 48. Okay, quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Can't get enough of that for memorization purposes. Okay, negative b, negative 4 becomes positive 4, plus or minus. Okay, b squared, negative 4 squared, negative 4 times negative 4, that is 16, minus 4 times a times c, which is negative 48, and that is over 2 times a, so 2 times 2. All right, let's bring it down. So 4 plus or minus, I have 16. Now I have a negative and a negative. 2 negatives is going to make a positive in here. So 4 times 2 times 48 is 384, all over 4. 16 plus 384 gives me 400. So I have 4 plus or minus the square root of 400. Positive discriminant means I'm going to end up with 2 answers here. The square root of 400 is 20. 20 times 20 is 400. So this equals 4 plus or minus 20 over 4. So there's my 2 possible answers coming from 4 plus 20 divided by 4 and 4 minus 20 divided by 4. And again, the reason behind that whole thing is because when I take the square root of 400, what number times itself is 400? 20, positive 20, but also negative 20. Negative 20 times negative 20 is also 400. So I have to account for both the negative and positive answers. All right, so here I'm going to get 24 when I add the top divided by 4. So that is 6. And here I'm going to get negative 16 divided by 4, and that's negative 4. So my 2 answers are 6 and negative 4. All right, last one, 16, looks a little different. It is in standard form. I've got 0 here. Just looks goofy because I don't have that middle term here. I don't have the a by itself. So there's no rearranging to do here. 0's here, so I can't do anything. A is 4. That's the coefficient to a squared. B is the coefficient to just a. There is none, so that means b is 0. And c is negative 25. Last time we got to write this. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Hopefully you're so sick of writing it because you've got it memorized. Okay, we plug in negative 0. There's no negative 0, it's just 0. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. 0 squared is just 0. Minus 4 times negative 25 over 2 times 4. So at first you might start thinking that something goofy is happening here, but it's 0 plus or minus. We're going to have 8 on the bottom. Inside my square root, it's going to be 0, but then I have a negative and a negative. This is going to end up being plus. So I'm going to get a positive number in here, which means I'm going to have 2 possible answers. So 4 times 25 is 400. So this is 0 plus or minus the square root of 400 over 8, which we just talked about. The square root of 400 is 20. So we're going to go ahead and do 0 plus 20 over 8 and 0 minus 20 over 8. So we're going to get positive 20 divided by 8. We're going to get negative 20 divided by 8. So we're going to get the same answer, just a positive version and a negative version. 20 divided by 8, it's 2.5. 0 minus 20 is negative 20 divided by 8, which is negative 2.5.